Hey everyone, I'm Clayfect, and I have noticed a trend lately that many creators have created these cool looking battle bots. But were I invited to the party? No! The self-proclaimed Clay Queen that nobody knows about haven't been invited to what technically must be my own party. This is a deep cut insult, which is why I am going to make the bot that can battle them all. So without further ado, guys, let's get started.
He took 100 pounds of clay, and then he said, hey, listen, I'm gonna fix this world today, because I know what's missing.
Now, I don't want a shiny battle bot with components that doesn't make any sense to me. So that is why I'm going to try to make our little clay fake bot not only seem beaten up, but also try to make sure that each component on this little bot does make sense. To me, at least. A quick disclaimer though, before any engineering interested or mechanic look at this. This is still purely fiction and I have no idea on how any mechanics work. Though please do comment and give me a gold star if I hit the mark on anything. However, I did have very much fun thinking of what components I should put on our little battlebot and how it would affect his performance. So please bear with me while I geek out over my little battlebot here. Starting with his legs, so to speak. Now, instead of going for wheels or legs, I decided to go for these caterpillar feet on a tank, making our little battlebot very durable, but also give it a big minus when it comes to dexterity. Now, throughout the sculpting process, you will see me do things a bit different than I usually do, and that is because we are trying to make something look more manufactured and less organic. So if I have a choice on either subtracting or adding clay, I will subtract clay this time. Simply because I think it helps giving it a more clean look, so to speak. I can hide a bit of the clay's natural wonkiness because it is going to be a beaten battlebot. But I am baking and sanding down the pieces as I go. Like with the caterpillar feet right now, they have already been baked when I start using Sculpting Ultralight to make the base. Normally in my sculptures I do prefer to use aluminium foil inside of them, but this time I wanted to be sure that I was going to be able to sand it and cut it after it had been baked. All in the hope of making it less organic and more mechanic. Now for the shape of this torso and the shape of the caps or the caterpillar feet, there isn't really any practical reason for it. I actually just saw a picture of a little Vespa scooter and felt inspired. So not any practical points, but I will give him some points in style. And I think it was about this time that I decided to call our little battlebot for Claybot, because I'm just that original. Now I picture Claybot as a brawling, small, ill-tempered little robot that are very rambunctious. He will never truly back down from a fight or give up. He will, however, drive away on his small caterpillar feet while shouting insults at his opponent. So I want that to sound flu in the sculpture, but before we can do that, we need to assemble little Claybot first. Before he goes in for what must be his third bake. Now, after he has been baked, I start covering up in pieces of clay to make sure that each metal plate is going to look smooth before I draw in the seams of our little robot. At this point, In the sculpting process, I was so happy with it. I felt like Claybot really were about to come together, and all the small details I put on, like the bolts and the rim around the cap of the caterpillar feet, just made him look even cuter. Now don't you worry, even though he is going to be sort of cute, I am also going to make sure that he is going to be a formidable opponent. So while his body is begging for a fourth time, I get started on working on his little monitor head. Now giving him a screen forehead is of course going to bring his defense way down, but don't you worry, because I have a plans to remedy that. Because who needs defense if they got speed? Which is why I'm using a metal straw and some cross clay to make some badass exhaustion pipes for him. So yeah, if you're keeping tabs on my fantasy engineering here, it means that I have made a robot that are really bad at turning but have a lot of speed. But that's okay, because we're going to remedy that later. I feel like I'm saying this over and over again. But that's because I at this point realized I needed to go for power and speed rather than defense and dexterity. So leaning into that, I decided after the exhaustion pipes to make a little battery display, so we could see how much power our little Claybot actually had. And with that nifty little detail on, I moved on to give him some, hydraulic hoses, I think, that was going to give his punching arms that I planned to make some more power, since I figured with such a bad defense, he needed a good close combat offense. Now with his hydraulics in place, I decided to give him a little speaker, because even if he couldn't beat them physically, I figured that he could verbally. Being all over the place and still very determined on making a winner battlebot here, I also decided to give him some small drawers for his ammunition. When I look at it now, I might have given our little Claybot a little too much thought, because when I started detailing the back, I did not only make a thermometer for the hydraulic, I also made some small lights so we could see how his CPU was doing, and gave him another speaker so he also could play some battle music while he was being beaten or running away. As the cherry on top for the back, I decided to give him a little stamp, because I realized that if he was knocked down on his back, he would have no way of getting up. So that is why with his hydraulics I decided on a stamp. That way he could simply push himself upright again. I also included a little CF so people would know that it was my robot that was knocked flat on the ground. Speaking of knocking, when I was done with our ground pushing hydraulics mechanism, I started working on the arms. Hydraulic mechanism? Wow. I really have no idea what I'm talking about. I can really feel that I am Danish and English is my second language, because my vocabulary when it comes to mechanic terms are dangerously sparse, I have to say. Now, let's move ahead. Pun not intended, but appreciated. Anyway, I think it's time for us to give a little Claybot a face. And while I do that, why not considering like, comment and subscribe if you like what I do and can stomach my bad English. It will really help me, my channel and this video a great deal. So please consider it. But with that, let's move back to our little monitor face where I gave it some cracks to make it a true battlebot before it goes into the oven again and gets sand down, making my job a lot easier when it was time to give him his armor plating. As you probably can tell from all my robot building mumble jumble, that only have place in a fantasy sci-fi book. I really had fun with this sculpture. From the base of the head to all the small details I'm about to work on, I had fun with every moment of it. Now, with the head in place, I moved on to making our little guy some pew-pews, giving him a long-range attack, which really was needed since his defense was so bad. But with the kabooms in place, I moved on to give him some wires. Now, I don't know what this kind of wire is called, but I've seen my computer have some of them, so I figured that little Claybot also needed them. Because that is apparently my logic, mixing a Whisper scooter with a computer equals BattleBot. I also gave his little glass screen a band-aid. Not only because it would help Claybot in looking a bit more beaten up, but also to make him just a little bit cuter. Because you can be cute and deadly at the same time. But with that, I moved on to his main melee attack, which of course is some beaten up boxing gloves. In hindsight, now looking back at it, it would probably have made more sense to make the gloves out of metal rather than make them out of leather. But oh well, even though if his power attack isn't that powerful, at least he can beat them with his words. Which I picture he probably does, no matter the size of the opponent. Now with his gloves on, all I needed to do was give him some antennas, because if you ever watch Futurama, you need everybody needs an antenna. And with them on, he was finally done and ready for his paint job. I start out with a dark metallic speed paint for all the crevices and the places that's going to be in shadow. Before I move on to Claybot's primary color, which of course is going to be purple. Though not all of him, because I also decided to give him a stripe. Now in Denmark we have a term for this sort of stripes that called a speed stripe. I don't know why, maybe we think that cars are going to be more fast if they have a speed stripe, but that's what we call 1 or 2 stripes that goes across the car. And since our little Claybot is relying heavily on speed, I thought it would be fitting and he would look rather fetching with a speed stripe. When the stripe on his head was done, I moved on to give him some eyes, using some tape to make sure that the eyes were going to be square. Now, the only focus I had with the face was actually just to show that our little Claybot was ready for a fight. Which is why I'm giving him some wet stripe, symbolizing angry wet cheeks. Throughout this painting process, I did jump back and forward, simply to make other paints dry while I was still working. But I have tried to match the clips for you guys, the best to my abilities, so the painting sort of made sense. Now with the dark metal paint dry, I started to dry brush in a silver color, simply to give it more dimension. Before I got started on a lot of detail work. Like the little band-aid on our Claybot's monitor head, finally finishing up his face and giving him the personality he needed. I have to say, the painting alone on our little fella was a project in itself. Not only for all the details, but also because later we are going to give him some wear and tear. So if you do prefer the shinier, newer Claybot, please look closer now, because we're going to mess him up a bit later. For now, however, we still have a lot more details to go. Like his computer wire thingy that I tried to match with a real computer wire thingy, so it looks sort of decent, before I painted all the small lights on his back. Only to remember that I almost forgot one of the most dominant features about him, his boxing gloves. I painted them in this dark rich magenta color that I truly love, before I moved on to paint the little patch the same color as his eyes, to make it all fit together. And with them done, I could finally move back to the back, finishing up all his last details, and there were many. There are so many details on this sculpture, so I didn't have room or time to explain all of them to you. So I only went with the most important ones. Sorry about that, but otherwise we would have about a 2-hour long video. So that is why we are switching from details to battle scars. Now, I painted by a rule that I learned on YouTube and I forgot where I learned it from, and that is every edge should be painted, in the middle should not. And it took so long. I'm even bored now just looking at it. You know what? Let's switch to the final part of the painting process where I dirty his wheels up. Finishing up the paint job so I could finally move on to lesson, where I gave his lights this orange glow-in-the-dark paint that didn't work for some reason. And also took a very long time to cure. Now, I know I'm not the most patient person, but it took twice as long as it did with the normal resin. Now, I am a fan of green stuff. I really do think they make cool things. Please sponsor me. But some products are just better than others. So I was relieved when I could finally switch over to the clear resin, finishing up our little clay bot. And with that, everybody, and my clayfuls, I think that is it for this sculpture and it for this video. I have to say, I am in love with our little clay bot here. I think he turned out super cute, and I am so happy I took the time with the paint job. Now all our little robot needs is someone to fight, so if you feel like making a fighting robot, then please hashtag me and we can battle it out and see who would win. For me, I think that Claybot generally will stand a decent chance in wounding his opponent. Not so much physically though, as mentally. But that's okay, as Mama Clayfate always said to me when I was a little child. Use your words, not your fists. And with that little piece of advice, it is unfortunately time for me to sign off. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you also enjoyed our little claybot here. Just like I hope to see you next time, but if you can wait until next time, why not click on the square to the right, where you're going to hear a scary teddy bear story created by me and read by my husband. But until then, as we would say here in Denmark, hold dig munter.